Hey guys, today I wanted to jump into installing Cert Manager, which is going to be your certificate manager for your entire cluster. I personally really like Cert Manager. It's very powerful. You can helm install it right into your cluster and it makes things very easy. However, I do want to spend the first part of this video explaining what Cert Manager is really doing and kind of how this infrastructure works. Now, I pulled this straight from their website, certmanager.io. I will have a link to here and the documentation on how to install it in the description. But in the meantime, I do want to go ahead and kind of jump into how this works. So let's say I own this domain, right? And one of the things I could do, right, is I have this ingress coming in for my Kubernetes cluster. I can expose a node for my Kubernetes cluster. That node can be port forwarded on my personal IP address, right? It's my home cluster. My personal IP address can have it. And then that port forwarded node can then be reached to anyone going to my IP address. Now, I can then use an nginx to specify, hey, if you are going through on this URL, johnnydeets.com, then you are going to go to this specific pod, right? Here are my DNS records, and here's my IP address, right? It's nothing too crazy. I don't mind showing it because you can figure it out if you go on my website anyway. But if you go here, it's going to take you to my pod, right? To my container. Now, that is awesome, right? That is a very powerful thing to be able to do. However, how does the domain address, like Cloudflare, and then also your pod know that this domain address is actually secure and belongs to you? Like, how does it know that the way you're being transported is proper, right? And I know that might sound weird, but you could always be getting a fake website, because even though this Cloudflare is sending you to this specific IP address, there might be a man in the middle sees that you're going to this IP addresses and provides a different node that they could spoof your website and then, you know, do whatever nastiness they want, because you're not actually going to the website that you're hosting on the node, but a different website that they're hosting that's pretending to be yours on the same domain. So that's where TLS comes in. That's kind of what Cert Manager gets at. That's the whole idea behind TLS. It's the transport layer security, right? And TLS is like very important for all things on the web because of that man in the middle problem and the old-timey issues of HTTP, right? That's what this little S right here comes from. That is the TLS. If it's HTTPS, it tends to be more secure because that means you have to have a certificate assigned to your website. And that's kind of what this is all getting at. So let me clean this up real quick and let's get a little more into it. So how does this work? What is Cert Manager doing to help me with my TLS troubles, right? Well, Cert Manager is going to be conferring with certificate authorities. And what a certificate authority essentially is it's a third party that is saying, hey, that this domain does 100% belong to this server. And to prove that, there's a few different ways you can do it. I tend to use, I believe it's called the ACME route. And what that really means is that there's this text file, right? There's this ACME challenge that gets supplied. And then this text file gets supplied to my domain account on Cloudflare. It tends to be a little bit easier to set up, to save any text files or anything. All you have to do is essentially give a API key to whatever domain provider that you're using. In this case, I'm using Cloudflare, and after giving that API key, I'm able to send this challenge. This is automatically done by the Cert Manager. I don't have to do anything here, and essentially Cert Manager will issue a TLS certificate at this specific domain address using that API key, and then that will assign this text file to your domain address. I'm pretty sure this is like a hash encoded key that then when you go to your website, it will prove, hey, and you can go to any website and see this. If you just go to connection is secure and certificate is valid right here. So you can see even Cert Manager is using Let's Encrypt. Let's Encrypt is a certificate authority that is free. Most people use it. It's very easy to use. And you can see here, you can see when it was issued and when it expires on. And then the SHA-256 fingerprints, essentially verifying, hey, this is the encoded like private key of the text file or the public key of the text file, saying, hey, this website is definitely the server that the domain belongs to. This Cert Manager makes this incredibly easy because all you need to do is you set up a single file in Helm when you're installing your application, or you can just do kubectl. That is essentially just an issuer for your pod, and then that will have your ingress, and your ingress just needs to be tied to it. So he will issue the TOS. He will also update the TOS if it expires, and as such, the issued TOS will then do that challenge to your domain provider as long as you have the API key, and then that will prove that you own this and that you own the server for that domain address, which will give you that checkbox, that beautiful lock icon saying that your connection is secure because you are actually going to the right place. Now, what you might also see is that sometimes this will have a lockbox, but it will have a line through it saying, hey, this is a self-signed cert. Essentially what that means is instead of using a third party, they're signing it, the certificate themselves, saying, hey, this is secure because I am signing it. And as you can imagine, that doesn't sound like the best route, because if you're a bad actor, you could just say, hey, I self-signed this cert. Obviously I'm secure because I signed it myself. You can see how that can kind of break down. Funnily enough, I think the whole US government uses self-signed certs, so more you know. And yeah, I think with this though, it's nothing too crazy, but it kind of gets at the crux of what we're going to be setting up today for our cluster. I mainly focus on this top part. You can do pod to pod. I think this is micro TLS, and then server mesh micro TLS. I don't do either of these. I think it can be important and it can be very useful depending on your level of risk tolerance on what you're doing. I don't need that for my personal applications, being that I believe if someone has access to my cluster, there's a much bigger issue. And if you have access to the cluster or you have access to a specific pod, you somehow gained privileged access to one of my websites and then also managed to get to a terminal to then be able to do things from there. I believe that if the TLS just terminates on the pod, that's usually good enough for most things. Yeah, obviously you need to know your risk tolerance for whatever application that you're going to deploy, so take that as it is. Yeah, and I think that hits pretty much on everything for this. So for actually installing Cert Manager into Rancher, it's very easy. So what you're going to do is you're going to hit repository, you're going to hit create, name it Cert Manager, make sure you don't have spaces, and then do HTTPS URL index generated by Helm. That will come from this address right here. It's charts.jetstack.io. Again, that will be in the description down below. And then no authentication needed because it's just a publicly hosted place. You can see here I added it the repository right here. And then finally, all I need to do is hit charts, look up Cert Manager, resync it. Took a second. So you can see Cert Manager right here. Go ahead and hit that, hit install. Okay, and I just learned something new. So if you actually want to create a new namespace, instead of actually going to the kubectl shell, Rancher makes it extra easy. I don't know how I missed that, but you can just type in this cert or the namespace that you would like, and then type in the name that you want. So you can see here, I'm naming this Helm Cert Manager, and then that's the namespace. It will create it for me. Actually, I don't believe you have to change any of these values YAML right off the get-go. I think the defaults are pretty gosh dang solid. If you are doing a very secure environment, maybe you need to change some of them. I think again, the defaults are pretty solid. So, and then just hit install. with that, we should be done. The Cert Manager, you can see right here, is installed, deployed successfully. You can see that in installed apps over here. And yeah, there shouldn't be anything else with this. There is some stuff you need to do to actually set up and use Cert Manager within your cluster, but we're not going to be going over that today. That'll be a future video. So make sure to subscribe, leave a like if you guys liked it, and if you have any questions or comments below, make sure to leave them. Thank you so much, and thanks for watching.